The silver barrel of her father's revolver gleamed in the late afternoon sun, as Zoe Zimmerman watched him clean it with methodical precision, knowing that with each swipe of his cloth, her future was being polished away just as thoroughly. Her fingertips worried the hem of her skirt as she prepared to voice the question that had been lodged in her throat since breakfast, when she'd overheard him speaking with the bank manager. "Is it true?" Zoe finally asked, her voice barely audible over the creak of her father's rocking chair on the porch of their modest Idaho City home. "Are you arranging a marriage for me with Mr. Blackwell?" Theodore Zimmerman paused mid-polish, his weathered face betraying nothing as he looked up at his 20-year-old daughter. The mining boom that had once made Idaho City prosperous had begun to fade, and with it, the Zimmerman family fortunes. The drought of 1872 hadn't helped matters, leaving their small cattle operation struggling and their debts mounting. "It's not arranged yet," he said finally, returning to his task. "But Harold Blackwell has made an offer that would clear our debts and then some. He's 45, established, respected. And I've never exchanged more than 10 words with him," Zoe replied, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Father, please, there must be another way." Theodore sighed, setting the revolver in his lap. "The bank is calling in our loan next month, Zoe. We'll lose everything your mother worked herself to death to help build. Is that what you want?" The mention of her mother, gone 3 years now to consumption, struck Zoe like a physical blow. She turned away, gazing down the dusty main street of Idaho City, where the bustle of miners and merchants continued unaware of her personal crisis. "When?" she asked, resigned. "He's coming for dinner tomorrow night to discuss terms." Theodore's voice softened slightly. "He'll provide for you, Zoe. That's all a father can ask for in these times." Zoe nodded numbly and retreated inside, her chest tight with unshed tears. In her small bedroom, she stared at herself in the spotted mirror, honey-brown hair pulled back in a practical braid, green eyes that her mother had always said reminded her of spring meadows, a spattering of freckles across her nose from too many hours in the sun helping her father with the cattle. She wasn't naive. Many marriages were made for practical reasons, but to Harold Blackwell, the bank manager was known throughout Idaho Territory for his cold demeanor and ruthless business practices. There wasn't a soul in town who could claim genuine friendship with the man, only business relationships carefully maintained through mutual benefit. When morning came, Zoe rose early, determination settling over her like armor. She would go to town for supplies, take the time to clear her head, and perhaps find the strength to accept her fate. What other choice did she have? Idaho City was already bustling when she tied her horse outside the general store. The gold rush might have peaked years ago, but the town had established itself as more than just a mining camp. Wooden boardwalks lined the main street, connecting the various businesses, the assayer's office, several saloons, a hotel, and the bank where Harold Blackwell presided over the financial fates of every resident. As Zoe entered the general store, the familiar scent of coffee beans, leather, and dried goods enveloped her. Mrs. Holloway, the shopkeeper's wife, greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Zoe. How's your father doing? I heard the cattle aren't faring too well with this dry spell." "He's managing," Zoe replied with a practiced smile, reaching for her shopping list. "We're hoping for rain soon." She moved methodically through the store, selecting flour, coffee, and other necessities, her mind elsewhere. Would Harold Blackwell expect her to maintain his house? Bear his children? The thought made her stomach clench. She had always imagined marriage would come with at least the possibility of affection, if not love. Lost in thought, Zoe bumped into someone as she rounded the corner to the dry goods section. Her basket tipped, sending a tin of coffee crashing to the floor. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, kneeling to retrieve it. "Entirely my fault, miss," came a deep, unfamiliar voice. Zoe looked up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a shock of dark hair. The stranger knelt opposite her, already reaching for the fallen tin. Their hands brushed, and Zoe felt an unexpected jolt that had nothing to do with the coolness of the metal container. "Isaac Morgan," the man introduced himself, rising and offering her the tin along with a smile that transformed his serious face. "New to town, just hired on at the Palmer Ranch." "Zoe Zimmerman," she replied, accepting both the tin and his outstretched hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip firm but gentle. "My father and I have a small place north of town." Isaac tipped his hat, revealing more of that dark hair. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way of the dandies who sometimes pass through town, but there was something compelling about the quiet confidence in his stance, the intelligence in his eyes. "The Zimmerman place. I've heard Mr. Palmer mention it. Good grazing land," he said. "It was," Zoe admitted, "before the drought." Something passed over Isaac's face, understanding, perhaps. Drought's hard on everyone, especially small ranchers. Palmer's feeling it too, though he'd never admit it. "I've seen worse, though. Rain will come." There was a certainty in his voice that Zoe found oddly comforting. "You sound like you've weathered a few dry spells." "Texas, Colorado, Montana," he nodded. "Spent the last 10 years following the herds. Drought's just another season, Miss Zimmerman. It passes." For a moment, Zoe forgot about Harold Blackwell and her father's financial troubles. "You've been to Montana. I've always wanted to see the mountains there." Isaac's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Most beautiful country God ever made. Valleys so green in spring you'd think you were dreaming, and mountains that touch the sky." Mrs. Holloway called from the counter, breaking the moment. "Zoe, dear, I've got those fabric samples you asked about last week." "I should go," Zoe said reluctantly. "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Morgan." "Isaac," he corrected. "And likewise, Miss Zimmerman." As she moved away, she felt his eyes follow her. It was a pleasant feeling, so different from the calculating gaze Harold Blackwell had fixed on her at church socials. Zoe finished her shopping quickly, her thoughts repeatedly drifting to the cowboy with the blue eyes. A ridiculous distraction, she chided herself. Tomorrow night, her father would likely settle her future with a handshake and Harold Blackwell's money. Daydreaming about a wandering cowboy was pointless. Outside, as she was securing her purchases to her saddle, a commotion erupted down the street. Shouts rang out, followed by the sound of galloping hooves. Zoe turned to see a runaway wagon careening down the main street, the panicked horses charging blindly through town. People scattered from its path, pressing against storefronts. Her heart stopped when she spotted a small boy, no more than 5 or 6, frozen in terror directly in the wagon's path. Before she could even draw a breath to scream, a blur of movement caught her eye. Isaac Morgan sprinted into the street, scooping the child up and diving for safety, rolling to protect the boy as the wagon thundered past, missing them by inches. The town held its collective breath until Isaac stood, setting the trembling child on his feet. A woman, the boy's mother, rushed forward, gathering her son into her arms with hysterical thanks. Isaac merely nodded, brushing dust from his clothes as though rescuing children was an everyday occurrence. Zoe found herself moving toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she said when she reached him. Isaac's cheeks colored slightly. "Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't," Zoe pointed out. "You did." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Zoe felt that strange jolt again. "Some things you don't think about, Miss Zimmerman. You just do what needs doing." Such a simple statement, but it resonated with her. Wasn't that what her father was doing, what he expected her to do? Accept what needed to be done for the family's survival. Are you hurt? she asked, noticing he was favoring his right arm. Nothing serious. He rolled his shoulder gingerly. Might have a colorful bruise tomorrow. Let me at least buy you a cup of coffee, Zoe offered impulsively. To thank you for what you did. Isaac hesitated, glancing at the son's position. I should get back to the ranch. Mr. Palmer's expecting these supplies. Of course. Zoe tried to hide her disappointment. Another time, perhaps. He studied her face for a moment, then smiled that same transformative smile that brought warmth to his serious features. I'll be in town on Saturday. If you happen to be here, I wouldn't say no to that coffee. Saturday. 4 days after her father's dinner with Harold Blackwell. 4 days after her fate would likely be sealed. Saturday, she echoed, knowing she might not be free to accept by then, but unable to bring herself to explain why. As Zoe rode home, the encounter with Isaac Morgan occupied her thoughts. There had been something so direct, so honest in his manner. So different from the stilted, formal interactions she'd had with Harold Blackwell, whose conversation always felt like a business negotiation. She arrived home to find her father in the barn, attempting to mend a broken stall door. His hands, once steady with a hammer, now trembled slightly, the legacy of years of hard work and harsh weather. Let me help, Zoe said, taking the hammer from him. With a few practice strikes, she drove the nails home. Theodore watched her with a mixture of pride and sorrow. You're too good at that. Your mother always said I was raising you more like a son than a daughter. Mother understood practicality, Zoe replied, testing the door's sturdiness. She taught me to sew and cook, but she also taught me that a woman needs to stand on her own 2 feet. That she did, Theodore agreed, his voice softening with memory. She'd be proud of you, Zoe, and she'd understand about Blackwell. She always put family first. The mention of Blackwell brought reality crashing back. What time is he coming tomorrow? 6 o'clock. Wear your blue dress. It brings out your eyes. Zoe nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her blue dress saved for church and special occasions. The dress her mother had sewn for her 19th birthday, the last gift before consumption claimed her. That night, sleep eluded Zoe. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between duty to her father and the growing dread of a loveless marriage. Harold Blackwell was not cruel as far as she knew, but neither was he kind. He was efficient, calculating, and utterly devoid of warmth, qualities that served him well as a banker, but promised little joy as a husband. And unbidden, the memory of blue eyes and a gentle smile kept intruding on her thoughts. Morning came too soon. Zoe threw herself into chores, cleaning the modest house until it gleamed, preparing a stew that could simmer all day, and finally, reluctantly, laying out her blue dress. By late afternoon, she could delay no longer. She bathed using precious water heated on the stove, washed her hair, and dressed with mechanical precision. The blue dress still fit perfectly, the color indeed highlighting her eyes and complementing her honey-brown hair, which she arranged in a more sophisticated style than her usual practical braid. When she emerged from her room, Theodore looked up from his chair, his eyes suspiciously bright. You look just like her, he said quietly. So beautiful, Zoe forced a smile. Is there anything else to prepare before Mr. Blackwell arrives? Theodore shook his head. Everything's ready. Zoe, I know this isn't what you dreamed of, but a knock at the door interrupted him. Zoe's heart sank. It was exactly 6 o'clock. Harold Blackwell was nothing if not punctual. Her father opened the door, his face arranged in a welcoming expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Harold, right on time. Come in. Harold Blackwell stepped into their home, removing his hat to reveal thinning gray hair. His suit was impeccably tailored, his watch chain glinting gold across his vest. At 45, he was still a handsome man, if one appreciated the cold, chiseled precision of his features. Theodore, he acknowledged, then turned to Zoe. His eyes traveled over her appraisingly as though assessing the value of a property. "Miss Zimmerman, you look lovely this evening." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell," Zoe replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Dinner is nearly ready. Would you care for some coffee while we wait?" The meal passed in a blur of polite conversation and carefully avoided topics. Harold spoke of the town's development, the new businesses opening, the railway line that might eventually connect Idaho City to Boise. Theodore contributed occasional comments about weather and cattle prices. Zoe served and cleared dishes, speaking only when directly addressed. After dessert, her mother's apple pie recipe, Theodore suggested Zoe show Harold the garden while he prepared coffee. Outside, the evening air was cooling rapidly, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Zoe led Harold to the small kitchen garden she maintained, pointing out the vegetables and herbs that had somehow survived the drought. "You keep a tidy garden," Harold observed. "That's commendable." "Thank you," Zoe replied, uncertain what else to say. What did one discuss with a man who was essentially negotiating to buy one's future? Harold cleared his throat. "I imagine your father has explained my interest in calling tonight." Zoe nodded, unable to form words. "I've always believed in speaking directly," Harold continued. "I find myself at a point in life where establishing a household seems prudent. I require a wife who understands practical matters and can maintain a respectable home. You are young, healthy, and from what I've observed, capable." He paused, looking at her directly. "I'm not a romantic man, Miss Zimmerman. I don't pretend to offer the kind of sentimental attachment young ladies often dream about. What I do offer is stability, financial security, and a position of respect in the community. Your father's debts would be settled, and his remaining years could be comfortable rather than desperate." Zoe forced herself to meet his gaze. "And what would you expect of me, Mr. Blackwell?" "The usual wifely duties. Maintaining my home, presiding over occasional social functions, and eventually, children to continue my name." His tone was matter-of-fact, as though discussing a business contract which, Zoe supposed, was exactly what this was. "I would not be a demanding husband. You would have considerable freedom to manage household affairs as you see fit, provided appearances are maintained." "Appearances," Zoe repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. Harold's expression remained impassive. "Society has expectations, Miss Zimmerman. I've built my reputation on reliability and propriety. I would expect my wife to uphold similar standards." Zoe looked away, across the darkening land that had been her home her entire life. The drought-stricken fields, the barn that needed repairs they couldn't afford, the fences sagging from neglect. Her father's trembling hands and weary eyes, the crushing weight of debt that threatened to take everything. "May I have some time to consider?" she asked finally. "Of course," Harold replied smoothly. "But I should mention that there are other young ladies in town whose families might appreciate such an arrangement. I've chosen to approach you first out of respect for your father, but my offer won't remain open indefinitely. Shall we say 1 week for your decision?" Before Zoe could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. A rider was coming fast down the road toward their house. Theodore emerged from the house, hand instinctively moving toward the gun he no longer wore at his hip. "Were you expecting anyone?" "No," Zoe replied, straining to see in the gathering darkness. The rider slowed as he approached, and Zoe's heart leapt when she recognized Isaac Morgan's broad shoulders and straight posture. He reined in his horse at their gate, then seemed to hesitate when he noticed Harold Blackwell standing beside her. "Evening, folks," Isaac called, removing his hat. "Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Palmer sent me with an urgent message for Mr. Zimmerman." Theodore stepped forward. "What is it, son?" Isaac dismounted, leading his horse through the gate. His eyes flicked briefly to Zoe in her blue dress, then to Harold, before focusing on Theodore. "Sir, Mr. Palmer wanted me to tell you that he's buying cattle to restock after losing so many in the drought. He remembered you mentioned having to sell some of yours and wanted to offer you first chance at some prime breeding stock he's bringing in from Oregon. They're drought-resistant, supposed to do well even in dry conditions." Theodore's expression brightened momentarily before reality reasserted itself. "That's mighty kind of him, but I'm afraid we're not in a position to buy cattle right now." "He thought you might say that," Isaac replied. "He's offering to partner with you. You provide the land and care, he provides the stock. Profits split after the first calves sell. Said it would benefit you both. He's short on grazing land since the new railroad survey cut through his south pasture." Zoe watched her father's face carefully. "A partnership with Edward Palmer, the largest rancher in the county. It could change everything. But would it be enough?" She glanced at Harold, whose expression had grown calculating. "An interesting proposition," Harold commented smoothly, "though such arrangements can be risky. If the drought continues, or if the cattle don't adapt as promised, you'd be in an even worse position, Theodore. Mr. Palmer's been successful with these cattle in drier regions than ours," Isaac countered, a hint of challenge in his voice. "He wouldn't make the offer if he didn't think it would benefit both parties." Theodore looked torn, hope battling with caution. "It's certainly worth discussing. When does Palmer need an answer?" "He's riding to Boys tomorrow, back in 3 days. Said you could give him your decision then." Isaac's gaze shifted to Zoe, lingering for just a moment before returning to Theodore. "He also mentioned that if you agree, he'd speak to the bank about extending your loan terms, given the new partnership." Harold stiffened almost imperceptibly. "As the bank manager, I should point out that such decisions aren't made based on personal requests, even from someone like Palmer." "With respect, sir," Isaac said, his tone remaining courteous but firm, "Mr. Palmer mentioned something about the bank's investment in the new railway line and how his cooperation might be valuable to certain parties." Zoe almost gasped at the subtle power play. Edward Palmer was leveraging his influence against Harold Blackwell's, and Isaac Morgan, seemingly just a messenger, was delivering what amounted to a challenge to the banker's authority. Harold's jaw tightened. "I see." He turned to Theodore. "Perhaps we should continue our discussion another time when you've had opportunity to consider all your options." Theodore nodded, looking slightly dazed by this unexpected turn of events. "Yes, that would be best. Thank you for coming, Harold." The banker retrieved his hat, nodded stiffly to all present, and departed with rigid dignity. Zoe watched him go, torn between relief at the reprieve and worry about the consequences of offending such a powerful man. Once Harold's buggy had disappeared down the road, Theodore turned to Isaac. "You ride for Palmer, you say?" "Yes, sir, going on 2 months now." "And he sent you specifically with this message, at this hour?" Isaac's expression remained open. "He did, sir. Said it couldn't wait, especially after hearing in town today that Blackwell was calling on you tonight with certain intentions." So Edward Palmer had known about Harold's proposal and had deliberately sent Isaac to interrupt. Zoe wasn't sure whether to be mortified that her situation was apparently common knowledge or grateful for the intervention. Theodore seemed to be thinking along similar lines. "Palmer's always had a nose for other people's business," he muttered, though without real rancor. "Well, come inside, young man. Least we can do is offer you coffee for your trouble." Inside, Zoe served coffee while her father and Isaac discussed the details of Palmer's offer. The more she heard, the more legitimate it sounded. Not charity disguised as business, but a genuine partnership that could benefit both ranchers. "Palmer says these Oregon cattle need less water, better suited to dry conditions," Isaac explained. "He's been looking to expand but needs more grazing land, Your north pasture has that creek that's still running, which would be perfect. Theodore nodded thoughtfully. It could work, if the bank would extend the loan. Palmer seems confident they will, Isaac replied, his eyes briefly meeting Zoe's over his coffee cup. Later, as Isaac prepared to leave, Zoe followed him to the barn where he'd stabled his horse for the brief visit. Was it really Mr. Palmer's idea to come tonight? She asked quietly as Isaac checked his saddle girth. He paused, then turned to face her. In the lantern light, his blue eyes were serious. Palmer did send me with the offer. The timing was my suggestion. Why? Isaac's gaze was steady. In town today, I overheard Blackwell telling his clerk he was finalizing an acquisition tonight, the way he said it. Isaac shook his head. No man should speak about taking a wife the way he'd speak about buying property. Zoe felt her cheeks warm, both at the implication that people were discussing her situation and at Isaac's evident concern. You barely know me, Mr. Morgan. Isaac, he corrected gently. And sometimes you don't need to know someone long to see their worth. He hesitated, then added, When that boy was in the street yesterday, you were running toward him too. I just got there first. Zoe blinked, surprised. She hadn't even realized she'd moved to help. That tells me all I need to know about your character, Isaac continued. Enough to be certain you deserve better than to be acquired by a man like Blackwell. My father's debts can be managed other ways, Isaac finished for her. Palmer's offer is genuine, Miss Zimmerman. It could save your ranch without costing your future. The directness of his gaze, the simple honesty in his voice, made something flutter in Zoe's chest. Thank you, she whispered. Isaac mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'll be in town on Saturday, as I said. That coffee offer still stands. If you're free. I hope to be, Zoe replied, surprising herself with her honesty. He tipped his hat, a small smile playing at his lips. So do I, Miss Zimmerman, so do I. As she watched him ride away, Zoe felt a curious lightness despite the uncertainty of her situation. For the first time in months, perhaps longer, she felt something that had been missing since her mother's death. Hope. The next morning, Theodore announced he was riding to the Palmer Ranch to discuss the partnership in person. No sense waiting, he told Zoe over breakfast. If there's a chance to save the ranch without, he broke off, looking uncomfortable. Without selling your daughter, Zoe finished quietly. Theodore winced. It wasn't like that, Zoe. Wasn't it? She met her father's gaze steadily. Mr. Blackwell made it very clear what he was offering and what he expected in return. Theodore had the grace to look ashamed. I was desperate, seeing everything your mother and I built slipping away, knowing I'd failed you both. He sighed heavily. But that's no excuse for what I almost did. Can you forgive me? Zoe reached across the table to take his weathered hand. There's nothing to forgive. You were trying to secure my future the only way you could see. But Father, I'd rather work this land beside you until my hands bleed than live in comfort with a man who sees me as a possession. Theodore's eyes glistened. You're so like her, same spirit. He squeezed her hand. We'll find another way. This partnership with Palmer could be the answer. Zoe hesitated, then asked, What do you know about Isaac Morgan? He seems different from Palmer's usual men. A knowing look crossed Theodore's face. So that's how it is, eh? Palmer mentioned him when we spoke last month. Said he hired him out of Colorado. Experienced cattleman, honest, hardworking. Doesn't talk much about his past, but Palmer trusts him, and Edward's no fool when it comes to judging character. He was kind, Zoe said simply. And brave in town yesterday. Theodore nodded. Might be worth getting to know him better then. If you're interested. I might be, Zoe admitted, feeling her cheeks warm. But first we need to secure the ranch. Her father rode out shortly after breakfast, promising to return by evening with news. Zoe threw herself into chores, trying not to think about Harold Blackwell's cold eyes or Isaac Morgan's warm smile. By mid-afternoon, she had cleaned the house, tended the garden, and was considering riding into town for supplies when she heard approaching horses. Expecting her father, she was surprised to see Harold Blackwell dismounting at their gate, accompanied by his clerk, a thin man named Simmons who was known for his meticulous record-keeping and absolute loyalty to the bank manager. "Mr. Blackwell," Zoe greeted him cautiously, remaining on the porch. "My father isn't here. He's meeting with Mr. Palmer today." "I'm aware," Harold replied, his tone clipped. "It's you I've come to speak with, Miss Zimmerman." Zoe's unease grew. "Me? What about?" Harold ascended the porch steps, stopping a respectful distance away. "I've been considering our conversation from last night. It occurred to me that perhaps I was too pragmatic in my approach. Women often appreciate certain gestures, I'm told." Before Zoe could respond, Harold reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring with a modest diamond. "Miss Zimmerman, Zoe, I am formally asking for your hand in marriage," he said, his delivery stilted but clearly rehearsed. "I believe we could form a beneficial partnership. You would want for nothing material, and I would gain a capable mistress for my household." Zoe stared at the ring, then at Harold's face. There was no warmth there, no affection, just the same calculating assessment she'd seen before. "Mr. Blackwell," she began carefully, "I'm flattered by your offer, but as I mentioned last night, I need time to consider, and I'd prefer to discuss this when my father returns." Harold's expression hardened slightly. "I understand your desire for your father's input, but as I explained yesterday, my offer is time-sensitive. The situation with Palmer changes nothing. His influence with the bank board is significant but not absolute. As manager, I still have considerable discretion regarding loan extensions." The threat was thinly veiled. Accept his proposal, or he would ensure the bank called in her father's loan, regardless of any partnership with Palmer. "Are you threatening us, Mr. Blackwell?" Zoe asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "Merely stating facts, Miss Zimmerman. Business and personal matters are separate, of course, but coincidences do occur." He extended the ring box toward her. "I don't require an answer this moment. Wear the ring, consider my offer, and give me your response within 3 days." Zoe didn't move to take the box. "And if I decline now?" Something cold flickered in Harold's eyes. "Then I would be forced to return to town immediately to discuss certain urgent bank matters with the board, matters concerning delinquent loans." It was extortion, pure and simple. Take the ring and buy time, or watch her father's dreams crumble before he even had a chance to secure the partnership with Palmer. With reluctance that felt like lead in her veins, Zoe reached for the box. "I'll consider your offer, Mr. Blackwell." Harold nodded, satisfaction evident in his bearing. "Excellent. I'll call again in 3 days for your answer. Good day, Miss Zimmerman." As Harold and his clerk rode away, Zoe sank onto the porch steps, the small velvet box clutched in her hand. She didn't open it again. The ring inside represented everything she dreaded: a future bound to a man who saw her as a transaction, a life measured in appearances and obligations rather than joy or affection. Theodore returned at dusk, his expression brighter than Zoe had seen in months. "Palmer's agreed to everything," he announced as he dismounted. 30 head of breeding stock, all drought-resistant. We split the profits from the calves, and he's already spoken to 2 board members about extending our loan. Says it's as good as done." Zoe forced a smile, hiding the velvet box in her pocket. "That's wonderful news, Father." "There's more," Theodore continued excitedly. "Palmer wants me to accompany him to Boise tomorrow to finalize some paperwork at the Territorial Land Office, something about registering the partnership officially. We'll be gone 3 days, back Saturday evening." Saturday, the day Isaac had mentioned meeting in town, the day before Harold expected her answer. That's very quick, Zoe managed. Theodore's enthusiasm dimmed as he finally noticed her strained expression. What's wrong, Zoe? Did something happen while I was gone? She considered telling him about Harold's visit, the ultimatum, the ring burning a hole in her pocket. But what good would it do? Her father needed this partnership with Palmer if Harold sabotaged it out of spite because she rejected him immediately. Nothing's wrong, she lied. Just tired from chores. The partnership with Mr. Palmer is wonderful news. Theodore studied her face for a moment longer, then nodded. Palmer thinks highly of that young man who brought the message yesterday. Isaac says he's the most capable hand he's hired in years. Trustworthy. Oh. Zoe tried to sound merely politely interested. Yes. In fact, Palmer's sending him to check on you while we're in Boys. Make sure you have what you need, help with any heavy work around the place. Theodore smiled knowingly. I mentioned you found him. Interesting. Father. Zoe exclaimed, her cheeks heating. Theodore laughed, the sound so welcome after months of worry that Zoe couldn't maintain her indignation. Palmer says Isaac's a good man, from a respectable family in Colorado. His father was a judge before passing a few years back. Zoe absorbed this new information, her curiosity piqued. A judge's son working as a ranch hand. There was clearly more to Isaac Morgan than she'd initially thought. When do you leave for Boys? She asked. First light tomorrow. Palmer's sending Isaac over mid-morning to see what needs doing around the place. Theodore's expression grew serious. Will you be all right here alone? It's the first time I've left since your mother. I'll be fine, Zoe assured him, pushing aside her worries about Harold Blackwell. The partnership with Mr. Palmer is too important to miss. That night, Zoe hid the velvet box containing Harold's ring at the bottom of her trunk, beneath her mother's quilts. Out of sight but not out of mind. 3 days to decide, he'd said. 3 days before he expected her to agree to a lifetime tied to a man who saw her as an acquisition. 3 days during which Isaac Morgan would be checking on her daily, by her father's own arrangement. Zoe slept fitfully, her dreams a confused jumble of cold diamonds and warm blue eyes. Morning came too quickly. Theodore departed with first light, promising to return with all the paperwork secured for the partnership that would save their ranch. As Zoe watched him ride away, she felt the weight of her secret growing heavier. She should have told him about Harold's ultimatum, should have shown him the ring. But it was too late now. She kept herself busy with chores, trying not to watch the sun's progress across the sky, trying not to listen for hoofbeats announcing Isaac's arrival. When he finally appeared, riding up their dusty drive mid-morning as promised, Zoe had to stop herself from rushing out to greet him. Good morning, Miss Zimmerman, Isaac called, dismounting with fluid grace. He was dressed for work in sturdy denims and a faded blue shirt, his dark hair slightly tousled beneath his hat. Your father get off all right? Yes, at first light, Zoe replied, wiping her hands on her apron. He was very pleased with Mr. Palmer's offer. Isaac nodded. It's a good arrangement for both of them. Palmer's been looking to expand his herd but was running out of good grazing land. He glanced around the yard. Your father mentioned some repairs needed doing while he's away. Zoe showed him the list Theodore had left fence mending, a leaky roof on the chicken coop, a broken pump handle at the well. Isaac listened attentively, then set to work without fuss, starting with the well pump since water was essential for everything else. Watching him work, competent hands disassembling the pump mechanism, strong arms lifting the heavy parts, Zoe found herself wondering again about his background. A judge's son from Colorado, now a ranch hand in Idaho territory. Your father mentioned you're from Colorado, she said when he paused to drink from the water dipper she offered. How did you end up in Idaho? Isaac wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, considering her for a moment before answering. After my father died, there wasn't much keeping me in Colorado. I'd worked cattle since I was 14, summers and school breaks. Found I preferred it to the law books my father hoped I'd take to. So you decided to become a cowboy instead of a lawyer? Zoe asked, intrigued. A wry smile crossed his face. My father would say I chose the uncivilized path. But yes, I followed the herds for a while: Texas, Kansas, Montana. Ended up in Idaho when I heard Palmer was hiring experienced hands. You miss Colorado? Isaac's expression softened. Sometimes. The mountains there are different from here, wilder somehow. My mother's still there, remarried to a good man. My younger sister too, with her husband and children. You have a sister. Zoe found herself eager to learn more about him, this man who seemed so different from the rough cowboys who usually pass through Idaho City. Alice, he confirmed. 23, with twin boys who are the terror of Colorado Springs. He chuckled, clearly fond of his nephews. She writes every month. Keeps trying to convince me to settle down with a nice girl so she can be an aunt too. The casual mention of settling down brought Harold Blackwell's proposal rushing back to Zoe's mind. The velvet box hidden in her trunk suddenly seemed to weigh on her like a physical presence. Isaac must have noticed the change in her expression. I've said something wrong. No, Zoe assured him quickly. Just thinking about family. It's been just my father and me since my mother passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Isaac said with genuine sympathy. It's not easy losing a parent. When my father died, I was angry for a long time. Rode away from Colorado thinking I'd never go back. What changed? He shrugged, his eyes distant with memory. Time, I suppose, and realizing that running doesn't solve anything. The hurt follows you wherever you go. There was wisdom in his words, a depth of understanding that surprised Zoe. This man had known loss, had wrestled with grief and emerged stronger. It made him seem more substantial somehow, more real than the carefully constructed persona Harold Blackwell presented to the world. The rest of the morning passed in companionable work. Isaac repaired the well pump with efficient skill, then moved on to the chicken coop roof while Zoe prepared lunch. They ate on the porch, discussing the ranch, the drought, the changes coming to Idaho territory with the expanding railroads. Thank you for the meal, Isaac said as he finished the last bite of apple pie. Best I've had since leaving Colorado. It was my mother's recipe, Zoe replied, pleased by the compliment. She taught me to cook when I was barely tall enough to reach the stove. She taught you well. Isaac set his plate aside, his expression turning more serious. Miss Zimmerman, Zoe, if I may, there's something I should tell you. The sudden shift in his tone made Zoe's heart quicken. Yes. Yesterday, after I left here, I rode back past town on my way to Palmer's ranch. I saw Blackwell at the jeweler's shop. He hesitated, then continued carefully. This morning in town, before riding out here, I overheard his clerk mentioning to the telegraph operator that Blackwell had secured his investment with you. Zoe felt her face drain of color. So Harold was already spreading word of their supposed engagement, even before she'd given her answer. Isaac watched her reaction closely. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but has Blackwell offered for you? The direct question, asked with such evident concern, broke through Zoe's resolve to keep Harold's ultimatum secret. He came yesterday, after my father left for Palmer's ranch. Brought a ring. Said I had 3 days to accept, or he'd ensure the bank called in our loan immediately. Isaac's expression darkened, a muscle tightening in his jaw. That's blackmail. It's business, Zoe replied bitterly. As he repeatedly reminds me, everything is business to Harold Blackwell. Marriage shouldn't be business, Isaac said, his voice low with suppressed anger. It should be, he stopped himself, then asked. What will you do? Zoe looked out across the drought-stricken land that had been her home her entire life. I don't know. If the partnership with Palmer secures the loan extension through the bank board, maybe Blackwell won't be able to follow through on his threat. But if he can still influence the decision, you'd sacrifice yourself to save your father's ranch. Isaac's blue eyes were intense, searching. It's not just my father's ranch, Zoe corrected him. It's my home, my mother's legacy, the only life I've known. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, then stood, his decision apparently made. I need to ride into town. There's something I need to check. Zoe rose as well, confused by his sudden urgency. What? Why? I have an idea, he said, already moving toward his horse. I can't explain now, but I'll be back tomorrow. Will you be all right here alone tonight? Despite her confusion, Zoe nodded. Of course. I've stayed alone before when my father had business in town. Isaac mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, determination mixed with something softer. Lock your doors tonight, Zoe, and don't make any decisions about Blackwell's offer until I return. Please. Before she could ask more questions, he was gone, riding hard toward town. Zoe watched until he disappeared from sight, wondering what idea had seized him so urgently and why it gave her a flutter of hope in her chest. The rest of the day passed slowly. Zoe completed her chores, then sat on the porch with her mending, watching the road for any sign of riders. None came. As darkness fell, she secured the house as Isaac had advised, checking the locks on doors and windows before retiring to her room. Sleep eluded her. Her mind kept cycling between Harold's cold proposal, Isaac's urgent departure, and her father's excitement about the partnership with Palmer. So much happening so quickly, all of it affecting her future in ways she couldn't fully predict. Morning light found her gritty-eyed but resolute. Whatever came, she would face it with the same strength her mother had taught her. She rose, dressed, and was feeding the chickens when she heard a horse approaching. Isaac looked as though he'd ridden through the night, his clothes dusty and his face showing signs of fatigue. But his eyes were clear and purposeful as he dismounted. "You're back earlier than I expected," Zoe greeted him, trying to read his expression. "Didn't sleep," he confirmed. "Too much to do." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a folded document. "I need to show you something." They moved to the porch, where Isaac spread the paper on the small table. It was a deed of some kind with official-looking seals and signatures. "What is this?" Zoe asked, scanning the formal language without comprehension. "Property deed," Isaac explained. "For a silver mine outside Colorado Springs. The Morgan Silver Trust." He pointed to a name at the bottom. "My father established it before he died. Put it in my name and my sister's with instructions that it be held in trust until we reached 25 or married, whichever came first." Zoe looked up at him, puzzled. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with I'm 27, Isaac interrupted gently. "Alice married at 20. The trust passed fully to us 2 years ago. I've never touched my portion. Let the managers continue operating the mine, reinvesting the profits. It's not a massive fortune, but it's substantial. More than enough to pay off your father's debts and restock the ranch properly." Zoe stared at him, stunned. "You're wealthy." A wry smile touched Isaac's lips. "On paper, I never wanted the money. After my father died, I just wanted to be away from everything that reminded me of him. So I rode away, worked with my hands, lived simply." His expression grew more serious. "But now I'm thinking there might be a better use for it than letting it sit in a Denver bank." Hope and confusion warred in Zoe's heart. "Are you offering to loan us the money?" Isaac shook his head, his blue eyes steady on hers. "Not a loan." He took a deep breath, then reached for her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers, strong from years of honest work despite the fortune waiting for him in Colorado. "Zoe Zimmerman," Isaac said, his voice low and earnest. "I know we've only just met, and this is sudden. But in the short time I've known you, I've seen your courage, your dedication to family, your kindness. I believe I could grow to care for you deeply that I already do if I'm honest with myself." Zoe's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. "I'm asking you to marry me," Isaac continued. "Not as a business arrangement, not to save your ranch, though my funds would certainly accomplish that. I'm asking because I want to build something real with you, something based on mutual respect and affection that could grow into love." He squeezed her hand gently. "I understand if you need time, if you want to wait to be sure. I'm not trying to force your hand like Blackwell, but I want you to know you have another choice, one that doesn't require sacrificing your happiness." Tears pricked at Zoe's eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming emotion. This man, this kind, honest man who had entered her life just days ago, was offering her everything: freedom from debt, preservation of her home, and the possibility of a marriage based on genuine feeling rather than cold calculation. "Isaac," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "this is—" "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to answer now," he assured her. "Think about it. Talk to your father when he returns. I just wanted you to know that Blackwell's ultimatum isn't your only option." Zoe studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the strong jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth that transformed when he smiled. 3 days ago he had been a stranger. Now he was offering her his name, his fortune, and his heart. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Isaac's expression softened. "Some things you recognize quickly, Zoe. I knew my calling wasn't the law the first time I worked a cattle drive. I knew Palmer was a man I could respect the first time we spoke." His thumb traced a gentle pattern on her palm. "And I knew you were someone special the moment you offered to buy me coffee after I pulled that boy from the street." The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, there was no artifice there, no calculation, just an honest man speaking his truth. "If I accepted," Zoe said carefully, "what would happen? Would we stay here, go to Colorado?" "Whatever you want," Isaac replied. "The ranch is your home, your heritage. We could restore it properly, expand it with Palmer's partnership, or we could start fresh elsewhere. Colorado, Montana, wherever you'd like to build a life." He smiled. "My sister would be thrilled to have family closer again." The freedom of choice he offered was dizzying after Harold's rigid expectations and conditions. With Isaac, she would be a partner, not a possession. "I need to think," Zoe said finally. "This is all happening so fast." Isaac nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Of course, I should continue the repairs your father requested while you consider." He moved toward the barn, then paused, turning back. "One more thing you should know, Zoe. Even if you decline my proposal, my offer to help with the ranch stands. I won't let Blackwell destroy your family's legacy out of spite." With that, he disappeared into the barn, leaving Zoe on the porch with the property deed still spread before her and her thoughts in turmoil. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. Isaac worked steadily on the ranch repairs while Zoe went through her chores mechanically, her mind replaying his proposal again and again. By evening, the chicken coop roof was mended, several fence sections repaired, and the well pump working better than it had in years. As they ate supper, the conversation stayed carefully neutral. The weather, the repairs completed, the cattle Palmer had selected for the partnership. Neither mentioned the proposal or Harold Blackwell. When Isaac prepared to leave for the night, Zoe walked him to his horse. The sun was setting, painting the drought-stricken landscape in hues of gold and rose that somehow made it beautiful despite its harshness. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Isaac nodded, his eyes softening. "I promised your father I'd look after things until he returns. I keep my promises, Zoe." "I believe you do," she replied quietly. He mounted his horse, looking down at her with that same expression of mingled determination and tenderness she'd noticed before. Whatever you decide, Zoe Zimmerman, I meant every word I said today. With that, he rode away toward Palmer's ranch, his straight-backed figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Zoe slept better that night than she had in days, her dreams filled not with anxiety but with possibilities. When morning came, she rose early, anticipation humming through her veins. Today, she would give Isaac her answer, but as she completed her morning chores, it wasn't Isaac who rode up the dusty drive toward her house. It was Harold Blackwell, accompanied again by his clerk. "Miss Zimmerman," Harold called, dismounting with stiff formality. "I trust you've had sufficient time to consider my proposal," Zoe steeled herself, lifting her chin. "Mr. Blackwell, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "Business in Boys requires my presence tomorrow," Harold explained smoothly. "I thought it prudent to conclude our arrangement today." "Our arrangement," Zoe repeated, the words bitter on her tongue. "You make it sound like a business contract." Harold's expression remained impassive. "Marriage is a partnership with mutual benefits and obligations. I see no reason to disguise that reality with romantic notions." He glanced around the ranch, noting the recent repairs. "I see Palmer's man has been busy. Your father mentioned he would be checking on you during his absence." Zoe felt a flash of unease at Harold's knowledge of Isaac's presence. "Yes, Mr. Morgan has been very helpful with the repairs." "Morgan," Harold said, as though testing the name. "An interesting young man. My clerk made some inquiries about him in town yesterday." He turned to Simmons, who produced a folded telegram, most illuminating. Zoe's heart sank. Had Harold discovered Isaac's true financial situation, his proposal? Was he here to counter it somehow? "Mr. Blackwell, whatever you've learned about Mr. Morgan is irrelevant to our discussion," Harold interrupted. "Though I find it curious that a man of his background would choose to work as a common ranch hand." He tucked the telegram away. "But to our business. Have you considered my offer, Miss Zimmerman?" Zoe took a deep breath. The moment of decision had arrived sooner than expected, but she knew her answer. "I have, Mr. Blackwell, and I must decline." Harold's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I see. May I inquire as to your reasoning?" "I cannot marry without affection," Zoe replied simply. "It wouldn't be fair to either of us." "Affection can grow with time," Harold countered. "Many successful marriages begin as practical arrangements." "Perhaps," Zoe conceded, "but not ours." "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell, but my answer is final." Harold studied her for a long moment, his gaze calculating. "You realize, of course, what this means for your father's loan situation." Zoe held his gaze steadily. "I do. And I trust that, as a respected businessman, you'll evaluate that loan based on my father's new partnership with Mr. Palmer, not on personal disappointment." Something cold flickered in Harold's eyes. "Business and personal matters are separate, as I've said. But the bank must protect its interests. Without additional security, I fear the board will have no choice but to call in the loan at the end of the month." Before Zoe could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Isaac was riding toward them at a gallop, pulling his horse to a stop in a cloud of dust. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, tipping his hat before acknowledging Harold with a cooler. "Mr. Blackwell." "Mr. Morgan," Harold replied with equally frosty politeness. "We were just discussing private matters. Perhaps you could return later." "Actually," Isaac said, dismounting and moving to stand beside Zoe, "I think my presence might be relevant to your discussion, especially if it concerns the Zimmerman Ranch loan." Harold's eyes narrowed. "The financial arrangements between the bank and its clients are confidential, Mr. Morgan." "Of course," Isaac agreed easily. "But as a potential investor in this property, I have a legitimate interest in its financial standing." Zoe turned to Isaac in surprise, not having expected him to reveal his intentions so directly. Harold looked equally taken aback. "Investor," the banker repeated. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Morgan?" Isaac's expression remained calm, but Zoe could sense the tension in his stance. "I'm prepared to pay off the Zimmerman loan in full, plus provide capital for improvements and livestock acquisition." Harold's surprise quickly gave way to calculation. "A generous offer. May I ask what collateral you possess to make such an investment?" "The Morgan Silver Trust," Isaac replied simply. "I've already wired my bank in Denver to begin the transfer process." Harold's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Whatever information his clerk had discovered about Isaac, it clearly hadn't included the full extent of his financial resources. "I see," the banker said finally. "A most unexpected development." He turned to Zoe. "May I ask what arrangement you've made with Mr. Morgan that would prompt such generosity?" Before Zoe could respond, Isaac stepped forward. "Miss Zimmerman has done me the honor of accepting my proposal of marriage." Zoe's eyes widened at Isaac's declaration. She hadn't yet given him her answer. But looking at his face, at the quiet confidence and warmth in his expression, she knew what her answer would be. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger as certainty filled her. "Mr. Morgan has proposed and I have accepted." Harold looked between them, his expression unreadable. "How fortuitous. And when did this arrangement come about?" "That's our private business, Mr. Blackwell," Isaac replied evenly. "But rest assured, the bank will receive full payment of the Zimmerman debt within the week." For a moment, it seemed Harold might argue further. Then, with rigid dignity, he inclined his head. "Very well. I will inform the board of this development. Good day, Miss Zimmerman, Mr. Morgan." As Harold and his clerk rode away, Zoe turned to Isaac, her heart pounding. "You told him we're engaged." Isaac's confidence faltered slightly. "I hope I didn't overstep." "When I saw him here, looking at you like you were property he was being denied." He ran a hand through his hair. "I wanted him to know you weren't alone, that you had another choice." "I do have another choice," Zoe agreed softly. "A better one." Hope dawned in Isaac's blue eyes. "Then you're saying yes," Zoe interrupted, her decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. "Yes, Isaac Morgan, I will marry you." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I meant what I said yesterday, Zoe. Every word. I want to build something real with you, a partnership, a family, a life together." "I believe you," Zoe replied, her own smile breaking through. "And I want that too." Isaac's hands tightened on hers, his gaze dropping to her lips. "May I?" In answer, Zoe rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative then deepened as Isaac pulled her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other wrapped around her waist. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you offered to buy me coffee." Zoe laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Is that all it takes to win your heart, Mr. Morgan? A cup of coffee?" "From the right woman," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Apparently so." They spent the day making plans for the ranch, for their wedding, for their future together. Isaac explained more about his inheritance, how he'd initially rejected it out of anger at his father's death, preferring to make his own way in the world. "But now," he told Zoe as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, "I'm grateful for it. Not for myself, but for what it means I can offer you." "I would have married you without the silver mine," Zoe said honestly. "It's not your money that matters to me, Isaac." He smiled, pulling her closer against his side. "I know. That's why I can offer it freely." The next day, Saturday, they rode into town together. Isaac had business at the telegraph office, sending instructions to his bank in Denver to transfer funds for the loan repayment. Zoe took the opportunity to visit Mrs. Holloway at the general store, sharing her news. Engaged. The shopkeeper's wife exclaimed. To Palmer's new man, "Oh, my dear, that's wonderful and so quick." When it's right, Zoe said simply, you just know. Word spread quickly through the small town. By the time Zoe and Isaac met for the coffee he'd originally suggested, it seemed everyone in Idaho City knew of their engagement. They received congratulations from townspeople, curious looks from those who had expected to see her with Harold Blackwell, and a particularly warm blessing from the minister's wife. Your mother would be so happy, she told Zoe. She always said she wanted you to find a good man who would see your true worth. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch together, Zoe felt a sense of rightness settle over her. In just a few days, her world had transformed completely from the dread of a loveless marriage to the promise of a future with a man who looked at her with warmth and respect. What will your family think? She asked Isaac as they approached the ranch. Your mother, your sister. Will they approve of you marrying someone you've known less than a week? Isaac chuckled. My mother will be thrilled I'm marrying at all. She's been after me for years to stop wandering and find a good woman. As for Alice, he smiled at the thought of his sister. She'll likely say she knew it would happen this way all along. She's always claimed I do everything either at a full gallop or not at all. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Zoe and Isaac rode to church together, their engagement now public knowledge. They endured the curious stares and whispered comments with equanimity, secure in their decision. Harold Blackwell was notably absent from the service. By mid-afternoon, they were back at the ranch, preparing for Theodore's return. Zoe wanted everything to be perfect when she shared her news with her father. You think he'll approve? Isaac asked as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing a welcome home supper. He sent you to check on me, Zoe reminded him with a smile. And mentioned to you that I found you interesting. I think he was matchmaking from the start. Isaac laughed. Remind me to thank him then. Theodore arrived just before sunset, tired from the journey but jubilant with success. The partnership is official, he announced as he dismounted. All the paperwork signed and filed. Palmer's first cattle will arrive next week, and he stopped, noticing Isaac standing beside Zoe on the porch. Morgan, didn't expect to find you here this late. Isaac stepped forward. Mr. Zimmerman, sir, there's something I need to discuss with you. Theodore's gaze shifted between the two of them, noting their proximity the way they stood together. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. Is that so? Well, come inside and tell me over supper. I'm famished. Over the meal Zoe had prepared, Isaac formally asked for Theodore's blessing to marry his daughter. He explained about his background, his inheritance, and his plans for the future, a future he hoped would include restoring the Zimmerman ranch to prosperity and building a life there with Zoe. Theodore listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. When Isaac finished, he turned to his daughter. And you, Zoe, what do you say to all this? I say yes, father, Zoe replied without hesitation. I want to marry Isaac. I believe we can build something good together. Theodore nodded slowly. It's mighty quick. You two barely know each other. We know enough, Isaac said, reaching for Zoe's hand across the table. The rest we'll learn together. Theodore studied them for a long moment, then broke into a wide smile. Well, I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Palmer mentioned you two seem taken with each other, and I've always believed my Zoe has good judgment. He raised his coffee cup in a toast. You have my blessing. Welcome to the family, Isaac. Later that night, after Isaac had returned to Palmer's ranch with a promise to return the next day, Theodore and Zoe sat on the porch together, watching the stars emerge in the clear Idaho sky. Blackwell came while you were gone, Zoe told her father quietly. Proposed formally. Tried to pressure me. Theodore's expression darkened. That man never did understand the difference between buying property and winning a heart. No, Zoe agreed, but it doesn't matter now. Isaac has arranged to pay off our loan. The ranch is safe. Her father reached over to squeeze her hand. You didn't agree to marry him just for that, did you? Because if you did— No, Zoe interrupted firmly. The money makes things easier, yes. But I'm marrying Isaac because of who he is: kind, honest, brave. Because when he looks at me, he sees a partner, not a possession. Theodore's eyes grew suspiciously bright. Your mother would be proud of you, Zoe, so proud. I think she would have liked Isaac, Zoe said softly. She would have loved him, Theodore confirmed. Just as I can see you're starting to. Zoe didn't deny it. The feeling growing in her heart with each day, each conversation, each moment spent in Isaac's company, it was new and tender, but unmistakable. Not yet the deep, abiding love her parents had shared, but the beginning of something that could grow just as strong. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, after the banns had been properly posted, and Isaac's mother and sister had arrived from Colorado. Alice Morgan, a vibrant woman with her brother's blue eyes and direct manner, embraced Zoe immediately as the sister she'd always wanted. Margaret Morgan, Isaac's mother, was more reserved initially but warmed quickly to the young woman who had captured her son's heart so unexpectedly. He hasn't smiled like that since before his father died, she confided to Zoe the night before the wedding. You've brought something back to him that I thought was lost forever. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful, held in the small church in Idaho City. Zoe wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Alice's skilled hands. Isaac, looking both nervous and elated, waited for her at the altar in a new suit that his mother insisted upon. No son of mine is getting married in range clothes, she declared firmly. When Zoe walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes locked with Isaac's, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but spoken with such sincerity that many in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. I, Isaac, take you, Zoe, to be my lawfully wedded wife. Isaac's voice was steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When Zoe repeated the vows, her voice trembled slightly with emotion, but her conviction was absolute. This was right. This was where she belonged. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Isaac's kiss was gentle, but filled with promise, the promise of a lifetime together, building something neither had expected to find. The celebration afterward was joyous, the entire town turning out to wish the newlyweds well. Even Harold Blackwell made a brief appearance, offering stiff congratulations before departing early. His clerk later confided that he was considering a position with a larger bank in Boise. As the sun set on their wedding day, Isaac led Zoe away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the town. From this vantage point, they could see all of Idaho City spread below them, and beyond it, the rolling landscape that included the Zimmerman Ranch, now the Morgan Zimmerman Ranch. Happy, Mrs. Morgan? Isaac asked, his arm around her waist. Very, Mr. Morgan, Zoe replied, leaning into his embrace. Though I'm still getting used to the name. We have a lifetime for that, Isaac reminded her, pressing a kiss to her temple. A lifetime for everything we want to build together. Zoe turned in his arms to face him. When you proposed to me that day, did you really mean everything you said about wanting to build something real together? Every word, Isaac assured her, his blue eyes serious. I don't make promises lightly, Zoe. When I proposed, I meant every single word. She smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him. So did I when I accepted. As they returned to their wedding celebration, hand in hand, Zoe marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few short weeks. From the dread of a loveless match arranged for money to the joy of a partnership based on genuine affection and respect, the drought would end, as all droughts eventually do. The ranch would prosper under their joint care and Isaac's investment. Children would come, 3 sons and a daughter over the years, all with their father's blue eyes and their mother's determined spirit. The Morgan Zimmerman Ranch would become one of the most successful in Idaho Territory. But on her wedding night, as Zoe lay in her husband's arms, none of that future was certain yet. All she knew was that she had found a man who saw her true worth, who had proposed with honesty and meant every word. And that, she decided as she drifted to sleep beside him, was the true beginning of their journey together, a journey that had started with a chance meeting in a general store and would continue, through all the seasons of their lives, as a partnership of equals building a shared dream. Years later, when their children asked how they had met and fallen in love so quickly, Isaac would always smile and say, "When it's right, you just know." And Zoe would add, with the wisdom of experience, "And when someone offers you their heart with honest words, you recognize the truth when you hear it." In the wild and often harsh reality of the American West, where survival itself was never guaranteed, they had found something precious and enduring. A love built on truth, strengthened by shared purpose, and destined to weather whatever storms might come, just as Isaac had promised when he'd proposed and meant every single word.